In this episode, we talk about the reason why India has been struggling to eliminate tuberculosis and what the latest global TB report reveals about it. We also talk about officials confirming that the Naugam police station blast was an unfortunate accident and not a conspiracy. But we begin today by talking about the significance of the Bihar elections results and the road that now lies ahead for the NDA. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week, under the leadership of Nitish Kumar, the National Democratic Alliance returned to power in Bihar with a historic mandate, winning 202 of the 243 seats. The alliance swept aside the opposition Mahagathbandhan, with the RJD managing just 25 seats and the Congress scraping together only 6. The results once again highlighted the public's trust in Nitish Kumar, one of the few chief ministers to have led the state for 2 decades, and someone who is credited with bringing some of the most basic amenities to the people during his tenure. To understand what lies ahead for him and his alliance now, and what this sweeping defeat means for the RJD and the Congress, my colleague Shashank Bhargav speaks to veteran journalist and the Indian Express's contributing editor, Neerja Chaudhary.
Neerja, many chief ministers would struggle to come back to power after 20 years. Only a handful of chief ministers have ever done that. And now Nitish has become one of them. And this is despite all these rumors about his health, that he's not doing well, and that it's people around him that are taking all the major decisions.
I think, for those people who went to the ground, to the state, and many commented on this, that there was no sign of any anger, unhappiness, anger, maybe boredom, maybe fatigue, but no anger after 20 years of rule of Nitish Kumar. And particularly, as you said, there's been talk of ill health, him not being quite there all the time. And this is not a secret in Bihar. Large number of people are aware of this. And yet you found notes of sympathy for him. It was almost like a thanks election, giving thanks to Nitish Kumar for what he'd done for Bihar. And many people said that he may not have done everything, but he has done things for Bihar, and he's not done things for himself, or his family. So they were grateful. There was appreciation, and they were aware that this is probably the last election that he would fight. So as I said, it is a sympathy election. It is a Thanksgiving election. In one way, tribute to all that he'd done. That kind of an emotional note that many struck in his favor. But as you said, nobody, not even the BJP, not the Janata Dal U, not other partners in the NDA, of course not the opposition at all, expected it to be such a sweeping victory of the kind that has really not been seen in recent years. As you say, many chief ministers have been there in the saddle for more than 20 years, more than him. But I don't remember any victory like this, a complete pro-incumbency wave in the state of Bihar that we saw.
And Bihar still fares pretty poorly on a number of economic metrics. But what Nitish has been able to do is deliver on some of the very basic amenities, electricity, water, schools. But the fact that even after 20 years, people are grateful for that, does that also mean that the memory of the Jungle Raj still looms large in the minds of people?
Yeah, I think it is at two levels. That the memory of Jungle Raj is certainly there amongst the older people. Lalu Yadav's first 5 years from 90 to 95 were marked by giving a voice to the OBCs, to the marginalized sections. And he represented not just the Yadavs at that time, he represented 85% of Bihar's population. It was after 95 that degenerated into what came to be known as Jungle Raj, which is extortion and kidnappings and I remember visiting Bihar, and you heard stories of people walking into a car showroom, just walking away with the cars and going walking into people's flats and taking them over. I mean, it was bizarre what was happening. And so it really degenerated into what came to be known as Jungle Raj. And it was that time that Nitish Kumar took over in 2005. So, getting the law and order right was one thing. Then getting, as you say, electricity, water, infrastructure, schools. People talk about when you go into the villages, they talk about the puliyas, the bridges that he's built all over. And even a thing like, visionary thing like Bihar Museum, which is more a recent thing, but when you go there, you realize what it represents. So he certainly wanted to add a developmental content to social justice that both he and Lalu Yadav flagged when he took over. Lalu Yadav took over after the Mandal decision by Mr. Vishwanath Pratap Singh, which heartened the other backward classes all over North India. So I think Nitish Kumar's contribution is really, governance and development along with what he calls social justice to empower the OBCs. And he took that process downward. He devolved that process to include and help and benefit the extremely backward castes.
Right, and besides this, the other significant contribution in Nitish Kumar's tenure has been what he has done for women. In fact, over the years, he's garnered a lot of support from women.
Yeah, he sensed very early on the changing aspirations of women in the state. And he started with his bicycle scheme to enable girls to go to school, giving them a uniform. This, helped the enrollment rate and curtailed the dropout rate from schools of girls. And then, of course, we are familiar with the, reservations in the local government of 50% and 35% reservation in police force and government jobs. And then it went on to the controversial policy of prohibition, which he's kept up with, because this was a demand from the women. Drunken husbands and domestic abuse was a big issue with them. And that has also, lessened as a result of this policy of prohibition, even though it has meant a loss of revenue in the state. And several parties this time said they will abolish it, they will do away with it. But that has been the kind of contribution that, he made. Of course, the figures do say on the economic front, there's a long way to go because the GDP is one third the national average. And, you talk about only 4% of the families earning more than 50,000 rupees. And the literacy levels are, lower than the national average. So all those things have to be dealt with. And the one cry I heard everywhere I went, whether it was from the women, whether it was from the extremely backwards, or it was the young people, it was about dealing with berozgari, unemployment. That was a burning issue as far as people are concerned.
Right, and what also worked for Nitish Kumar this time was the transfers of 10,000 rupees in the accounts of women to start an enterprise. I mean, that was a major thing introduced by his government. Talk about how much that helped him.
Yeah, 1.5 crore women got 10,000 rupees in their accounts to start small ventures. And this happened just before the elections. And the last tranche was given even while the model code of conduct had kicked in. So this has been attacked by the opposition as bribery to the voters. But as far as the women were concerned, they all spoke about it and they talked about voting for Nitish Kumar. So it was I believe, a game changer in this election. And I think other incumbent chief ministers are going to follow this, emulate this model of Nitish Kumar, which is Mahila plus money to win elections. And it worked in Madhya Pradesh, Ladli Bahan Yojana. It worked in Maharashtra, Ladki Bahan Yojana, in a different form. That was a monthly payment that was promised. And now this one-time payment of 10,000 rupees, those associated with the Jivika livelihood scheme. And what is very interesting is that these Jivika Didis are trained motivators of other women. So they were, because they got this amount, they would have, I believe, motivated many others to believe that if they voted for Nitish Kumar, they too would get this money. And while Rahul Gandhi and others say, it's an unfair election from the beginning, and they're wondering whether it was above board, this election, given the scale of it, others believe that the 10% surge, historic surge in this election in Bihar, and the 9% difference between female voters and male voters may have done the trick and given Nitish Kumar and the NDA such a sweeping mandate.
Aneja, we've been talking about Nitish, but tell us, what do these results mean for the opposition? Because RJD and the Congress together, they managed to get only 31 seats. I mean, they were absolutely decimated.
It's a huge setback. In 2010 also, the RJD had suffered this kind of a setback. But it will affect the morale of the opposition, I believe. So a very good statement has come from the RJD saying we have to not have sorrow in defeat or arrogance in victory. That's the way they have responded, which is a very politically savvy statement, I would say. So I think in Bihar, he will probably have to reinvent his party, reinvent the Mahagathbandhan, and bring in, I believe, other political energies that were unleashed, like Prashant Kishore, and, try and, piece together a new opposition under the RJD's leadership, which he'll be called to do. But otherwise, it will also, demoralize the opposition nationally. That this kind of a defeat that they've had to face in Bihar, with very important elections now due in 4 states next year, which is West Bengal, which is Assam, which is Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. So that is something they will have to deal with now in the coming weeks.
And Nirja, any lessons you think this election has for the Congress party? Because, the challenges that it faced this time, it has faced in the past also. For example, Rahul Gandhi had his Adhikar Yatra, but then nothing was done afterwards. In the lead up to the campaign, there was a lot of infighting within the Mahagathbandhan. They couldn't figure out the seat sharing ratio. So, talk about what the Congress should be doing going forward.
Prashant Kishore has not done as well as expected. He's done poorly compared to the expectations. But he moved into the picture only 3 years ago, set up a new party, launched it a year ago, did Padyatras through the villages of Bihar, all over, up and down, fielded 243 candidates, all in 3 years. That political space was there for the taking for the Congress party. And it has failed to do it very simply because the Congress doesn't follow up. The Congress does not do hard slog of the kind that, say, a Prashant Kishore or an Arvind Kejriwal did. And, there is also complacency. You had a very good voter Adhikar Yatra by Rahul Gandhi on to raise questions on the intensive revision of rolls that the election commission was conducting, and there was a huge crowds would turn up, and very enthusiastic crowds were there. Now, and then Rahul Gandhi just left. He was not there for the following 2 months. And Tejasvi Yadav didn't pick up also. He had his own yatras, and I'm told there were differences between the two. And they also delayed the projection of Tejasvi Yadav as the chief ministerial candidate of the Mahagathbandhan till very, very late. It almost came to a break point and therefore affected the sharing of seats. Not only that, they lost the momentum, which was so necessary to build, and they had initially seized the initiative. So the Congress has to do, anyway, we keep talking about this introspection or whatever, but unless the Congress gets its act together, it's bad news for the party. And if it's bad news about the Congress, it's bad news about the opposition. And if it's bad news about the opposition, it's bad news for our democracy.
And finally, tell us, what does this win mean for the BJP, which has emerged as the single largest party in the state for the first time? What road lies ahead for them now, especially in light of Nitish Kumar's health, who we know has not announced a successor?
I think the BJP has it good, really good this time, because as we know, Nitish Kumar's health is not good. So I think they will make him chief minister, though. Home Minister Amit Shah had said at one point that while we are fighting the election under Nitish Kumar's leadership, the question of the chief minister after the elections will be decided by the newly elected MLAs. In other words, they were keeping the door open on who will be the chief minister. But given the fact that 2025 Bihar is about Nitish Kumar more than anything else, I don't think they will trifle with the sentiments of the people of Bihar expressed so explicitly through the mandate. And I believe they will probably bide their time, and also, but the control of the government in Bihar will rest with the BJP, I believe. To lead a government in Bihar has been a dream project of the BJP, because they have led governments in other states of the Hindi heartland, but not in Bihar. And it's very significant that the Prime Minister, soon after victory, struck a note that was quite interesting. He talked about taking the social justice plank forward, apart from governance and development. Now, that is, the Hindutva is not a note they have struck in Bihar. And in some way, Nitish Kumar has kept the Hindu Muslim question also in check. And so the model for success for the BJP in Bihar has been very different from the model that they pursued in neighboring Uttar Pradesh, where the Hindu Muslim question has been very dominant. You don't find any anti Muslim feeling in Bihar like you do in Uttar Pradesh.
Next, we turn our attention to India's fight against tuberculosis. For years now, India has remained one of the biggest contributors to TB cases globally. According to the Global TB Report 2025 released last week, the country recorded around 27.1 lakh cases and more than 3 lakh deaths from the infectious disease last year. And while India is narrowing the gap between the estimated number of cases and the ones actually being diagnosed, the report says that the country is still far from eliminating the disease. The findings also come at a time when the Union Health Ministry has not released detailed data for the India TB report this year, even though it has published it every March in the previous years. So, what challenges does India face in combating tuberculosis, and what is driving the rise in infections? To break this down, we are joined by the Indian Express's Anona Dutt. Anona, can you tell us what the Global TB report is supposed to tell us and what its latest findings reveal?
So, this is a report that comes out every year and estimates the burden of tuberculosis across all the WHO countries. And this year, what we've seen so far is that the number of estimated cases as well as the number of deaths due to TB in India have gone down. So it's at about 27.1 lakh cases and 3 lakh deaths, which is lower than the 28 lakh cases and about 3.2 lakh deaths that were estimated last year, the previous year, which is 2023. The report also shows that there is a decline in the gap between the estimated number of cases and the number of people who actually get diagnosed and are put on treatment.
And back in 2018, PM Modi had said that by the end of 2025, TB would be eliminated entirely from India. So, how close are we to that target?
So, when we are talking about our end TB goal, WHO has an end TB strategy, and that has different milestones for the year 2020, 2025, and then 2030. So, the aim is to reduce the number of TB cases by 20% and deaths by 35% This was the target for 2020, which is what we have achieved half of right now. The 2024 report shows that there has been a 21% reduction in cases since 2015, but the number of deaths have only reduced by 28%, which is not the target of 35%. We are nowhere close to the 2025 milestone, which is reducing the deaths by 75% and the cases by 50%. Of course, for the end TB final target, which is meant for 2030, the aim is to reduce the number of cases by 80% and the number of deaths by 90% when compared to the numbers in 2015. So, even though India had pledged to eliminate TB by 2025, which was 5 years ahead of the global target, we are not anywhere close to this.
But on the bright side, what we have found out is that there has been an improvement in the diagnosis of tuberculosis in India, right?
Yes, there has. So, for one, after COVID-19, the network of molecular tests, people might know it as RT-PCR tests, has become very wide. So, there are a lot of labs, even in the government sector, which do have this facility and can easily do this testing. The benefit of molecular testing for TB is that even at the first go, it can tell whether a patient is resistant to certain commonly used TB drugs. And then they can be put on the regimen for drug resistant TB. So that is a benefit. And now most TB patients are offered this test at the beginning of their treatment. Earlier, they would have microscopy, which essentially you grow the sputum sample in the lab to see whether they have the pathogen in it. That is time consuming, as well as it cannot always tell whether a person is resistant. So the testing itself has improved. There was also a campaign that was started by the government in December last year to actively screen for more TB cases. And in that, they used several diagnostic techniques, including the handheld X ray devices, which are very good at picking up asymptomatic cases. So, usually, you would diagnose a person only after they have symptoms like cough, weight loss, etc., and they come to the healthcare system. But in the active screening, you can screen them using a chest X ray, which can tell you they have TB even before they start showing these symptoms.
So, Anona, what are the challenges that India still faces as far as elimination is concerned?
So, the biggest challenge is the numbers. We have the highest number of TB cases in the world. That means we have to work really hard to eliminate the disease. The numbers are going down, but it's still very big. India accounts for nearly a fourth of all the TB cases in the world. So, numbers are definitely a challenge. And then, of course, it's also a challenge of resources because usually TB affects the most vulnerable and the most poor people in the country. And sometimes they do not have access to healthcare or they cannot access healthcare in a timely manner, all of which can lead to worse outcomes for TB. So that is another challenge. And of course, a big challenge is undernutrition. You would see TB actually happens more frequently in people who are undernourished. And also, the treatment is not as effective if a person does not have proper nutrition. So, although the government has programs which provide this monetary support as well as nutritional support, undernutrition can remain a challenge.
And what do medical professionals have to say about these developments and what needs to be done in order to eliminate TB from the country?
So, there are several things that have to be worked on. The experts have said that actually there is quite a good progress because, yes, the number of cases that are declining in India is actually more than the sort of global average. And some of the strategies that have been adopted by the government need to be followed and monitored closely over the next few years to ensure that we do reach the target. There have been several new initiatives that the government has started. For example, providing the all oral 6 months course of treatment for multi drug resistant tuberculosis, for which, earlier the treatment could last, anywhere between 18 to 24 months. And when you reduce this time for treatment, it also improves compliance, which means people are more willing to take their entire dose of medicine. So that is one innovation that has happened. Then there are also, changes that have been made, such as increasing the direct benefit transfer to the patients from rupees 500 to rupees 1,000. There is also a scheme to help provide additional nutritional supplement to the TB patients through volunteers. It's called Nikshay Mitra, where people can agree to keep providing these nutrition baskets to the patients for the duration of their treatment. So these are some of the changes that have been made. And of course, there are doctors who have also suggested that, a model that has been demonstrated in Tamil Nadu can also be followed, which is a very easy form of differentiated care where people who have a very low BMI, who are undernourished, who have other, comorbid conditions which put them at a higher risk of complications, these people are provided additional support. They are provided timely care to ensure that they do not have any adverse outcome, which means they do not die in the first 2 weeks after the diagnosis of the infection. So, this is also something that can be implemented elsewhere in the country for better outcomes and reducing deaths due to TB.
And finally, we talk about the Naugam police station blast. More than 350 kilos of ammonium nitrate and several hundred kilos of other explosive making materials, including chemicals, batteries, detonators, and timers, were stored at the Naugam police station on the outskirts of Srinagar. All of it had been seized from a Jaish-e-Mohammed module linked to the Red Fort blast and transported by the J&K police from Faridabad, a journey of over 1,000 kilometers. On Friday night, this material triggered a massive explosion inside the station, killing 9 people and injuring 29 others. Within minutes, the police station turned into a heap of rubble, with officials saying that the remains of the deceased were recovered more than 100 meters away. As reported by the Indian Express's Basharat Masood, police officers say that the seized items were packed in airtight containers, moved in small trucks, and handled according to the standard operating procedures. They explained that once a case is registered, anything recovered from the investigation, like documents, weapons, contraband, or explosives, must be taken into the custody of the police station handling that case. This is necessary for forensic tests and to build evidence against the accused. Officials told Masood that every item has to be recorded before storage and with the seized bags sealed and stamped in the presence of a magistrate. After samples are taken for forensic analysis, the police station decides whether to keep the material on site or hand it over to the court. If the items pose too much risk, they can be shifted to the court's Malkhana. Explosives, they said, should ideally be examined by the forensic experts within 24 hours. Police must also obtain court permission before destroying any seized material. In this instance, however, the Naugam material could not yet have been destroyed because it had not been sent for testing. An official also recounted that some years ago, a bomb containing several kilos of ammonium nitrate was found in the region. At that time, police involved the bomb disposal squad, which destroyed the material through a controlled blast. Yesterday, Jammu and Kashmir's Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha ruled out any terror conspiracy behind the Naugam explosion, calling it an unfortunate accident. He announced that a magisterial inquiry, which is mandatory in such cases, has been ordered. Meanwhile, the J&K government has announced an ex gratia of rupees 10 lakh each for the next of the kin of those killed and rupees 1 lakh each for those injured. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Vijay Doifore and produced by Shashank Bhargav and me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.